And we are alive as you can be in this material world. Greetings, good evening. So pleased that some of you have stopped by to continue with investigating a very profound and often mysterious book. And that is really what all true forms of spirituality are steeped in, which is those schools of mystery, getting to that place where you recognize that the things that make sense in this world don't always make sense spiritually, and spirituality, or the realm of God consciousness, is often a complete set of paradox as far as this material world. So welcome to The Miracle Within, and we are investigating A Course in Miracles. And this is a book that has profoundly changed my life, as well as the lives of countless numbers of others. And as we continue to explore what the Course is, what it means, what the actual content of this fairly heavy book. I mean, you can see it's not a little tablet by any means, but it does have a lot of answers for all of us as far as the mysteries of life and why things are the way they are in this material world. And I'm sure, as most of you are aware, we've got horrendous events happening in the United States. First, we had hurricanes, followed by storms with tornadoes, and now we've got firestorms all up and down the West Coast, and California is especially being overwhelmed, and it's in a region that I used to live in, so I'm very familiar with that area up around Santa Rosa, and sending out a lot of love and support to the people who are really seeing their life vanish in front of them. And again, it's that whole idea of, do we cling to the flesh, or do we finally let go and allow ourselves to exist more in the realm of spiritual awareness rather than the physical realm? And these are tough times for a lot of people all around the planet. India, Pakistan has had floods. The Philippines have had some problems. So sending out a lot of love and support to people all around the planet, because we all are one people. We are all one being that was created by God, and we live and move and have our being in God. So even though what appears to be going on around us is horrific, the truth is none of the losses that we're experiencing are things that are real. Just stop and think about it. The only thing that you come into this world with is a body. Now, you may be in an environment where you have advantages, etc., but the truth is, when we enter and when we exit this world, we leave everything of this world behind. So I'm going to start off this evening's dialogue with a little interesting side note. Today is October 11th, and my father's birthday was October 10th, 10/10, 1916. And when I was 6 years old, he died the day after his birthday, which was 10/11. And when I was just getting back from Vietnam and starting to explore alternative thinking and astrology and things along that line, because of the need to know the time of my birth for an astrological chart, I dug out my birth certificate and discovered that I was born at 10:11 a.m. So in some ways, I've always felt like I was the fulfillment of some sort of a expected outcome in my father's life. And this is 2017, so 71 years later, I am once again watching the clock return to that moment in time where his life intersected with my life, and a number of events occurred as a result of that. And the interesting thing is that 1011 has been a synchronicity number for me for all of my life. And when I notice like 1011 on a watch or a clock, when the numbers 1011 come up synchronistically, it's always a sign that I should pay attention, that I would come to point. And so I would invite you to look at things in your life that might parallel that. Some special numbers that are synchronistically connected to your destiny, to your journey in this world. And if you'll pay attention, if you'll recognize the signals, then often a lot of the turmoil and angst and frustration of your life will be circumvented as a result of just your being on point, your being aware of what's going on. So anyway, happy October 11th, and it is a blessing to be here, and I thank all of you for showing up. We are going to continue with A Course in Miracles, and about 2 weeks ago, we were looking at, from the text, the introduction to the idea of how we came into this material form, how this world happened. And A Course in Miracles really gives a whole different insight as compared to biblical texts. Because if you look at the story in Genesis, we have a God who is kind of like an auto plant, producing bodies all over the place and producing fragmented and somewhat chaotic world, and then placing his beloved child in that world to fend for itself. And A Course in Miracles really shifts the blame for the creation that we're experiencing away from God and puts it back in our own hands. And the Course explains to us that because we are in fact created in the image and likeness of God, we have the power to create as God did create. And what we've done is we've created a dream. And in the dream, the whole idea of mortality is being experienced. So as far as the true creation, the one creation of God, God just extended itself. So God recreated God, and that's who we are. And this goes on into infinity. So when we're thinking in terms of God, there are no containers around the idea of God. There are no limitations around the idea of God. So God is infinite and eternal. And its creation, since God was the only thing that ever was in reality, its only creation would be itself. That's the only point of reference God would have to create from. So our world of trees and birds and sunsets and all of these different experiential things is something that we dreamed up in an attempt to run away from our position in heaven. And we certainly downgraded in a horrific way from being the true masters of all of our possibilities and potential to exploring this idea of separation from God and from each other. So basically, we took an idea of separation and tried to create a reality around that. And it created a dream, an illusion And that's what we are trying to resolve on our way back to our true home in the mind and eye of God. So looking at the resolution of this illusionary problem, there's only one way that we can be practical in our restoration of our personal truth, and that is through what? That is through unification. Separation creates fragmentation, it creates this material world, but unification resolves all that and gives us an underlying thought, an underlying premise behind what the true creation is. And so when you're witnessing a beautiful sunset, you're visually experiencing one realm of consciousness, but the essence behind that, the true beauty within that, is the act of love. So the projection of love was originally the idea behind creating this world that we wanted to inhabit. And if we look deeply into all of the different things that are going on around us, underlying this material illusion, underlying this physical phenomenon, there is, at the core of it all, love. And if you're a student of the Bible, especially the New Testament, one of the reference points that Jesus makes on more than one occasion, and that is explored on more than one occasion, is the idea that God is love. So whenever you are witnessing love, whenever you are experiencing love, and whenever you are sharing love, passing love on to others, projecting love out to the universe around you, you are in the process of manifesting God, because God is love. And so when we can see the beauty in the world that surrounds us, we're seeing the essence of God. When we can alternatively see the broken and the defamed and the horrific, we're witnessing our own physical creation, our creation of the illusion. And the idea of the illusion always goes back to the idea of death, because once again, we take reference to what Jesus said. Jesus said, God is life. So if you step out of God, then there can only be one outcome to that, and that is death. But we are immortal spiritual beings, and so the only way we can experience death is to have a body and to ultimately use that body like an automobile and drive it down into the ground, drive it into death over and over again. And after a while, it starts to become obvious that this was not a good choice. This was not a choice that we made that was in our best interest. So now we're trying to restore the truth to our consciousness, to our minds. And that truth is achieved only when we step out of being who we think we are, only when we can step out of being Jim or Joan or Bill or Sally or whatever, and enter into that place where we experience that reunion with our true identity, the Christ within, the God within, that exists and dwells eternally inside us. So looking at the idea of returning to God, the atonement at one meant when we are at one with God, we're looking at the pardon me. We're looking at the atonement as that contact point where restoration of our sanity is experienced. And we're going over to, in the text, section 3 of chapter 2, and it's the altar of God. The atonement can only be accepted within you by releasing the inner light. So Basically, we have created a world of darkness. We have created a world of material form. And our body, even though it can be utilized by spirit, it is in fact a way of blotting out the truth of who we are. We are magnificent beings of light, and yet we have allowed ourselves to put ourselves inside a body that has trapped us, that has blocked off that light to the rest of the world around us. It says, since the separation, defenses have been used almost entirely to defend against the atonement and thus maintain the separation. This is generally seen as a need to protect the body. See, so now we're back to the idea of the physical being. The many body fantasies in which minds engage arise from the distorted belief that the body can be used as a means for attaining atonement. So we're beginning to get the information here that's very salient as far as this next step that we're going to make, which is the recognition that the body, which we're trying to use for atonement, we're trying to drag this ego, this physicality, back into God. And God is not capable of recognizing or allowing that. God doesn't push us away. It's just that we are pushing ourselves back from entering into that realm of pure consciousness, pure being. Perceiving the body as a temple is only the first step in correcting this distortion. So we have to see the body apart from the physical desires that we normally associate with the body, which is, you know, sex and death and rock and roll. So we're learning that the body can be used for furthering our advancement, our growth back to spirit. But we first have to recognize what we initially created the body for. And we initially created this body to experience separation from God and from each other. So in truth, bodies can appear to join. You know, we have these experiences of copulation and reproduction and sexual intensity, etc., etc. But the true function of the body is still to create this barrier. And so once we begin to recognize that the union we're seeking is a union of minds and a union of spirit, that will transcend this physical obsession we have with sexual desires, eating desires, all of these different desires that we have to make us believe that the body is real. The body craves this, the body needs that. So we're beginning to kind of tone down the idea of the body being our true identity. And as we start to entertain these ideas, you're going to run into resistance from your ego, from this identity that you have created apart from God. It's like your true identity is God, as not as the first cause, but as God projecting itself into reality. So you are God, but you have elected to reject that identity. And you stumbled off into the wilderness and you created Joe. And Joe is this person who has, DNA and all of these connections to the past and anticipations to the future and limitations of genetics and limitations of diet and limitations of movement on one level or another. So all of these different things that we have created as our personal identity are actually kind of a trap. But because we created it, we love it. See, this is the catch-22. That is the nature of the way the mind works. When we give the mind a thought to work with, and we want to create something, that creation becomes our beloved. Just as God, when he created God in reflection of himself or itself, arrived at a point where there was this intense level of love and a desire to protect and a desire to fulfill the needs of this creation. So that's what everything is hinged on now. We've created an ego, and we want that ego to continue to survive. We want to cater to that ego. That ego has got a lot of inflamed areas where it wants to attack everybody around it. It wants to attack God. It wants to attack us. See what I just said? It wants to attack God. It wants to attack us, believing that it will survive on its own if it can only kill us off. So if you spend time observing your ego, you'll begin to get a sense of where this deeper darkness resides. And you'll also begin to realize that preserving the ego is the least advantageous avenue you can take. And the atonement is removal of the ego. For perfect effectiveness, the atonement belongs at the center of the inner altar. That's that part within us that God resides in. That is the part of us that is the Holy Spirit, that is the Christ, that is the God, that is the love and the creativity and the joy and the beauty and the wonderment that we experience when we step out of the ego. So that place is our sacred place. That's what we are working on uncovering. That's what we are working to reunify with and to re-experience. It says, where it undoes the separation and restores the wholeness of the mind. And this is where the game is going on. The game is going on in the mind. So within our mind, we have created a dream. We have experienced the illusion of separate experiences. We have become fractured from each other, and we have subsequently become fractured from God. And so we have to find that place within us that is sacred, that altar. And what do we use an altar for? The altar is a place of offering. And so we offer our love out of this altar of ourself. So on the journey, you're going to find a lot of different ways that the ego is going to try to attack you and disrupt you and disorient you. And there's all these diversions. You can get all wound up in the politics of the day and be up on a rant about the evil Mr. Trump or the saintly Hillary or whatever it is that you want to believe in. But ultimately, all those things are doing is distracting you from actually experiencing you. See, this is the beauty of the way the ego operates. This is the magnificence of this thing we have created, in that it is so committed to self-preservation that it will take any avenue available to keep you away from that journey that is going to restore you to your truth and to your home. So it gets pretty rugged out there. I don't deny that. I was a political activist at one point in my life. I was a humanitarian activist at one point in my life. And then as I started to really get deeper into the course, I began to realize, until I got to a point where I knew who I was, all of these projections, all of these pursuits, all of these ways of saving the world were distracting me from being who I truly was. And if I am who I truly am, in truth, I am that reflection of God. I am God within God. And that is a source of empowerment. That is when you become effective in this material world. Not to go out there and throw rocks at the other side and join into the cause, because the cause has been going on since the beginning of time. You go back and you read history, and the 1890s, the 1880s, the 1870s, looking at the labor movement in this country, looking at the politics in this country, looking at the Civil War and the Reconstruction. It's the same thing. 100 years ago, 150 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, we find this same contingent going on, this conflict, this opposition. And the opposition is designed as a distraction, and it works beautifully. It works magnificently. So what we have to do is realize that the truth is we have to get back to our truth before we can effectively have any effect on the world around us. And then we walk into a situation and we enter the room able to look at illusions and make the illusions cease. So imagine 10 people living in that state of consciousness and how they would affect their immediate surroundings. And then imagine 100, and then 1,000, and then 10,000. And as this process continues to grow exponentially, eventually we'll arrive at that place where we will expel the illusion of sickness, of maliciousness, of all of the ills that torment this world. So really, the Course in Miracles is giving us the key to escaping the constant conflict and re-entering into a realm filled with love, filled with truth, and filled with illumination. We bring light into the world. Later on in the Course in Miracles, we'll be reading about how we are the light of the world. And the way that we bring that light into this world is by surrendering to the truth of our spiritual identity, to the truth of the Christ that dwells within us. So that's pretty much the direction of the text that we will be going in for tonight. Real fast here. Wow, time kind of evaporated here, but let's look at lesson number 12, because last week, if you'll remember, when we were looking at the lesson, we had arrived at that point where we realized that my meaningless thoughts, my constant brain chatter is creating a meaningless world, and this meaningless world is what I'm experiencing, and I'm not happy about that. So lesson number 12 says, I am upset because I see a meaningless world. And that really is what does happen. We get very frustrated, very angry, very upset, and we can't identify it. We can't say, oh, it's because of this or because of that. We just feel this anger, this frustration within ourselves at various times. It wells up from nowhere. Well, the truth is, it's because we are continuing to observe a world that was created by our chaotic thinking. And on a deeper level, in our subconscious, we know the real world is filled with peace and harmony and joy. So to look at this lesson real fast, it says the importance of this idea lies in the fact that it contains a correction for a major perceptual distortion. You think that what upsets you is a frightening world. You're projecting all this crap outside of you, see? Or a sad world, or a violent world, or an insane world. All these attributes are given it by you. You're the cause of the madness that you're witnessing. The world is meaningless in unto itself. So when we create this world of our beliefs and project it out into the confines of our surroundings, we are creating an illusion, and the illusion is based on distortion, and the distortion is the root cause of all of our anger and frustration and pent-up anxiety. So that is more incentive to get back to the place where we actually are in control of our mind. Our mind is no longer like this galloping horse running across the desert, dragging us behind it. And that's really what most of us have experienced for most of our life. The feeling that we've been dragged by a wild animal through a parched and dry terrain. So as we continue to explore more ideas in the course, next week we'll pick up with the lessons and do number 13 and 14 and 15 and kind of concentrate on that idea that we are the ones who are in charge of our minds, and we have failed to give the mind the dimension and the form and the structure that it so desperately needs. And that's the way out of this mess. So on one side, you can say this is spirituality. On the other side, you can say this is pure psychotherapy, because the two become one as we go deeper and deeper and deeper into levels of understanding the world we inhabit. So I'm going to shut it down for tonight. I do hope that you are having a beautiful week. Pick up a copy of A Course in Miracles if you are curious, or if you want to learn how to control the mind. It's a magnificent journey. I have a website called The Miracle Within, and it's www.themiraclewithin, all one word, .org. Gives you a nice overview of A Course in Miracles, and encourage each and every one of you to get out there and just let love happen. Just don't hold back on it. That's the only thing that is keeping you from reaching to that next level of fulfillment, of actually bringing something out of yourself and sharing it with the world and making the world a better place. So I'll see you in 7 days. Get out there, share the love, pass the love around, and we'll be chatting soon.